Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion on data-driven storytelling. My name is Ashley Kirk, data journalist at the Telegraph. We've got Tanya Cordrey, CDO of the Guardian, Neil Vogel, CEO of About.com, and Rahul Chopra, CEO of Storyful. So we all use data in different ways to inform the storytelling that we do. So first of all, if I could just ask you, how does data inform your day-to-day role in your separate organizations? Start with you, Tanya.
Okay, so data plays a really important role in all that we do at The Guardian. So I can only just give you a hint of the few things that we do. So for example, we use real-time analytics, which really helps the editorial team understand how their content's performing, on what platforms, what's working well, what's not working so well. We also use data to test lots of stuff on the website. We're constantly doing A/B tests, multivariate testing to really ensure our proposition, our product is working wonderfully and delighting our users. And then we also use data for things such as product health checks to make sure that the website's running correctly. We'll also use not just quantitative data, but we do a lot of qualitative data. So we have a user experience lab that we built 2-3 years in The Guardian. And we actually bring audiences into the building to actually understand how they interact with the various products we may be building at any given time.
Cool.
Data is, it's at the center of what we do. I talked another thing this morning about our challenges at About.com, which was 3 or 4 years ago. We were in very bad shape, and now we're in relatively good shape. And the core of what we did is we actually have 5 PhDs that work at About now, and our head data scientist we actually hired from NASA, which no one believes we did, but it's true, we did. And we're a really big content site. We have almost 3 million pieces of content, and for our users who come to us for very specific things, right? When you come to About.com, you generally you need help with something. You want to paint your bedroom, diagnose why your foot hurts, or cook a chicken or something. So we spend an awful lot of time trying to put the correct content in front of you that can help you the most. We're a super vertical experience. When you come in to cook chicken, you don't care about a Mexican vacation. You want to know every single thing about your task to cook that chicken, and we spend an awful lot of time and resources to figure out what content to serve you to make your journey most useful.
Okay, Rahul?
So does it work?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you, sorry. So for us, I'll continue the theme. Data is core to what we do every day. The model for Storyful is how can you combine technology, parsing data that comes from every single social platform around the world, to look for when clusters of people begin to talk about something that's relevant to one of our partners, whether that be a news organization, a brand, a media organization, whatever it may be. And then what we look to do is we have a team of journalists that go in, dig in that data, and are looking for key themes of acceleration, bring context to that data and that content, and then get that in the hands of our partners as fast as possible. Without the data angle, there is no Storyful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we all have analytics platforms for our respective platforms, and so we're continually monitoring the metrics for it. So can you just describe a little bit as to how that process works in terms of you analyze the metrics? For example, About.com, you went through a redesign recently, so you're doing little tiny things, and you're looking at how readers or viewers are responding, and then describe the process of analyzing that data and then implementing and changing your strategy.
So I think for us it was twofold. First, when I got there 3 years ago, I couldn't tell you the next day how many page views we had the day before. We were in nowhere land. But now we can get down to the individual visitor and their exact behavior down to click patterns. And the challenge is not all that is useful. A lot of it is crap. And you need really smart people to frame what you're using the data for an objective. You guys talk a lot about testing. The key with a test is you got to know what you're testing. You have to understand what the data is telling you. If there's an A and a B, you have to know what that A and that B mean. And we spend a lot of time doing that. I think we talk a lot about data discipline, and it means two things. It means you need data to make decisions because you need to know what's going on, but you have to have the discipline to use the data in a way that's useful and not we I particularly am not fond of meetings where I come in and someone presents some data to whoever. That's dumb. That is, like, what does that mean and what do we do? Like, what is the action that follows up from the data? And it's very easy when we've got like a lot of fancy dudes with fancy degrees to get mired in the mud of the data, but it's figured out what is the action item and move forward. And for us, it's worked really well.
Okay.
I would agree with that because I think there's been a lot of comments over the last few years where people are worried that people will blithely follow the data and not question it. And actually, it's about getting insight. It's not about getting data per se. And it's also being brave enough to ignore the data at times because the data isn't the thing that makes the decision. It informs the decision, but it doesn't necessarily rule what decision you're taking. So your question about how does it affect everybody, let's say at The Guardian, I think people use the data at The Guardian very differently. So all the journalists, I think, use it depending on what the story is, what the reaction to the story is, because each story is unique, almost like a fingerprint. Let me give you an example. When we were looking at the data from yesterday, we did a story, this won't surprise anybody, we did a story about why is it foggy? And one of the data points we collect is that we look at the median reading time. Now that's not a key top-level metric, but for us we like to look at time because we want to see how do our users engage with the article. And we can see what the average reading time, so with this article, forgive me, I might quote these figures slightly incorrectly, but with the why is it foggy, it was a very short piece, so it's probably on average would take 38 seconds to read. But we could see over a third of our users were reading it to the end, and if not, taking more than those 38 seconds. So for that was a really key metric point for us yesterday because we went, hold on, we wrote something in a certain type of very simple. We wrote something that was very relevant. We wrote something that was very short, and actually the users seemed to really respond because they read the whole piece. So for us, that was an interesting data point for that moment, but not necessarily an interesting data point for every story we wrote yesterday.
Okay. Storyful?
I think for us, the challenge that we face is more, being that on the B2B side, it's the questions that we continuously get are, well, what's the data behind what you're passing to us? Which usually lands up being a conversation about nothing, because when you begin to answer the question, you begin to ask back, what are you looking for in regards to what we're asking? And you typically get random requests like reach or virality or broad terms or words that don't really mean very much, right? So I think it's that level of rigor that is needed to understand exactly what the metrics that you're after, and how is that valuable to accomplishing whatever goal that you're trying to accomplish.
Okay. And at Storyful, there's a lot of like user-generated content in terms of the content that you produce or collect. And so the process of like collecting it and then verifying it and then sort of passing it on, how does the data refer to like each specific part of that process?
So the data again comes from, I'd say, first part is right at the beginning of that value chain, which is parsing across every one of these social platforms. Like I said earlier, looking for when clusters of people are beginning to mention words, hashtags, key topics, themes that will resonate within the community that we're after, right? So, and we've built tools that are basically looking for that acceleration related to when clusters of people talk about that. Right? This is just one way we parse through that data. And then it's a team of journalists that are using that data to better understand what's happening. Is this important? What's at the end of this? And if it's content, which it typically is, can we get that content verified and in the hands of our partners as fast as possible? The data then comes in during the verification piece, but it's really most important in the beginning of that chain.
Okay.
I
Anyone?
think we've actually started to use data that isn't even our own data to make decisions. Like about business models, we have expert writers that cover very specific topics very deeply, and they're arranged in channels. So we have a money channel and a food channel and a style channel. For instance, in our money channel, we've recently added a Bitcoin writer, a Bitcoin expert. The reason we did that isn't because we had some editor out there saying, hey, we need to cover Bitcoin. It's because our data science team went and ingested all of these social signals, all these search signals, all these what are people talking about signals, even some compilation of what's written offline signals and said, we have a hole in our financial content. We need to talk about this. And we went and we hired a really terrific Bitcoin expert. And it's one of our faster ramping areas that we've had. And our guys say it all the time, data is everywhere. And it's to what you said, it's the key with data is you have to figure out what data you want to use and what data you don't want to use. Otherwise, whenever someone tells me or you see like a resume or I'm a data-driven decision maker, like I don't know what that means. Like I'm a data-driven decision maker. Like that sandwich costs $1 less than that sandwich, but the same there's so much. You just have to figure out what to use to make your life and your product better.
So at The Guardian, you have an inbuilt analytic platform, OFAN. And so I was wondering, what was the decision? Why do you use it instead of other platforms that are already available, like Adobe or Parsley or something? What advantage does that give you in the industry to use your own inbuilt analytics, and what advantage does that give you?
So I wish I could tell you that it was this brilliant strategic plan that we implemented fantastically well, and it's been that's been the root of the success. Actually, the origins of it are, I think, more powerful and more humble. And if anybody wants to see the Guardian OFAN system, we've got it on the Guardian booth just by the content stage. But basically, it was born out of a hack day. So we regularly hold hack days internally. And what happened was that one of the developers was approached by the then huge search engine optimization team of one. And it turned out at that point that the search engine optimization expert was having to rely on the data we had at the moment, which was from Omniture, but the data he had was always 24 hours old. So in terms of making decisions, particularly if you're dealing with search engine optimization, the data being 24 hours late is not really very useful. And the developer basically built a sort of, in many ways, an analytics system sounds too grand, but a way of having real-time data because we could access it from the logs. And he built it over the 2-day hack. And after the hack, normally what happens is that we often turn the hacks off, but the SEO editor, a chap called Chris Moran, pleaded with the engineer called Graham Tackley and pleaded with him not to turn it off. And he was running it off his laptop for the longest time. And then what we found was that the other journalists started to really want to have this data too. And Chris sends out a daily email and he started including links. And we could see that something magical was happening where people wanted the data. I think if we tried to impose it on the team, there might have been a lot of pushback. But actually, we just set it loose in the wild. And it's incredible because we can see now that probably 1,000 people in any given day or week at The Guardian access our real-time analytics system. Obviously, we've now kind of really, truly made it into a proper product. It doesn't live on Graham's laptop anymore, but it's been, for me, a really interesting experience of where data has been truly embraced because people wanted it, not because they were told they needed it.
Okay, and so another question for all three of you. What do you think is the most important use of data in your jobs? Is it sort of to help the organization make money, or is it to help user or reader experience? What do you think is its biggest use?
I mean, we're part of a public company, so I'm sure they'd like me to say make money. It's cultural. It's not a specific use case. And to further something you just said, we have these great engineers, and what we learned after having these engineers, these PhDs on this data team, is that we put a designer on their team. And now we build a dashboard for pretty much everything they make for people to use. And once, like, a sales guy can segment his audience across all these things in a really beautiful visual way, and they go to one meeting and they sell one thing, all of a sudden every sales guy wants this tool and they want to use data in a way that's helpful to us. And we've really tried. You can't stand and just start telling people that aren't data people to use data. They don't know how to do it. I didn't know how to do it. So we almost, like you said, we productize, and we almost try and commercialize everything we build with a very beautiful, super easy to use, if I was cynical, I would say dumbed down interface that lets the data tools that are really helpful in making decisions get out to everybody, whether it's the results of a super simple A/B design test or whether it's something deeper and more important, that's been the biggest win for us. And it's sort of like the give them a fish or teach them to fish. Like if we can teach all of our guys to fish, we're way better off. And that's what we've been trying to do.
Okay. Do you want to go?
From our perspective, it's two pieces, right? It's how can we leverage the data to ensure that we're always finding the right piece of content at the right time for our partners. And then two, using the data in regards to ensure we're B2B play, how do we ensure that the content we're finding is the right content mix for the partners that we have? Because we don't have a website that we're putting this content out on. If it doesn't meet the needs of our partners, then what value really does it have?
So I would say at The Guardian, at the heart of it, we use data to really amplify our journalism. And that's what our raison d'etre is. And I think that I'm often asked, by having data at the forefront of what you do, does that mean you're just going to pander to the sort of lowest common denominator? And that has certainly not been the case, because if I look at what happens at The Guardian, we have limited resources, but we use our data capabilities to make sure we can put, as you've said, the right story in front of the right people and the right audiences. The world's more complicated today, and actually data plays an important role on that. And that's what's helped people like The Guardian get huge global audiences. We have, 140 million uniques a month, and only a third of those are from the UK. So if I look at The Guardian and I look at, say, what are the top biggest stories we've ever had of all time, they're not the sort of stories about Lindsay Lohan or skateboarding cats or funny football goals, and we've probably had content on all those things. But the top one would be, for example, the video we had on Edward Snowden when he came out as being the whistleblower. The second one is an article called The Top Regrets of the Dying, which is basically the story of a palliative nurse telling the sort of common theme she hears for her patients. And the third one was an amazing picture of Detroit and the sort of decay in Detroit. And they're all three really fantastic pieces of journalism. And I think what's amazing is that our understanding of data meant that we got significant audiences for that quality journalism.
Okay. And then just one final quick question each. So we talked about several different types of metrics: reach, page views, dwell time. Is there any particular one that you, just as a person, pay more attention to that catches your eye first? Like, each of you, quickly, like.
I'll start. My favourite one is loyalty, because I think at the end of the day, you can have reach, you can have engagement, but if you can get people coming back more often, you know you're doing a good job.
Yeah, our data team, I have a dashboard on my phone that at any moment, anywhere, I can tell you who's on the site, top 10 articles, and last 24 hours of the 4 key things I care about, which is exactly what you said. Page views, dwell time, because we're not trying to game page views, and the top performing stuff. It's just super easy, and everybody has access to it, not just me though. Everyone in the company can use it, and it's interesting.
Mine's going to be engagement in the broader sense of the terms. There's 2 ways that we look at it. One is our partners and how much content they're using, what content they're using, the scale of it. And then 2, the content that we're finding from the entertainment side of what we do, the viral content, the watch time, how successful is it, how long are people watching the content, things like that.
Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone.
Brilliant.
Cheers.
Thank you.